the title of the greatest plane ever made is one that would be debated forever. When initially thinking about it, it is very tempting to drift towards the sexy planes, the Mustang for its long-range fighter performance, the Spitfire for its role in the Battle of Britain, the Lancaster or B-17 for their efforts in the bombing campaign, the F-15 for its excellent air-to-air kill survival rate. In the end, it could well be a most unassuming aircraft. A plane that was built for more than 50 years. It filled nearly every role that a plane could do and took off and landed on all sorts of surfaces over our planet. Its name became a class, much like Glad and Kleenex did for their products. And that plane is the Piper Cub. In Rochester, New York, a pair of brothers, Gordon Taylor and C.G. Taylor, formed the Taylor Brothers Aircraft Corporation. Here they built a small two-seat aircraft called the Chummy. This could in some ways be considered the original Cub. It shared a lot of their similarities: the overhead wing, the seat arrangement, and a small engine. It did not sell well, and when Gordon died, the remaining brother moved to Bradford, Pennsylvania. It was a difficult time to be trying to sell new aircraft, as in 1929 the Great Depression was hurting businesses everywhere. But Taylor had a backer in the form of William T. Piper. Taylor would work on a new design, one that the Depression could well have influenced. The Taylor Cub was a clever aircraft. It was smaller than the original Chummy, had a better name, was built around a welded steel tube fuselage for strength and then a fabric covering. The wing was made of wood and aluminum with a fabric skin. They used struts to brace the wing. The landing gear was fixed and came with a tail skid. This kept weight and price down by avoiding a retractable gear. Not the easiest of features still in 1929. Although it started with a smaller engine, this soon changed when they could obtain the 40 horsepower Samson 9AD radial from France. First flight was the 10th of September 1930. They would need a new engine as the Samson engine was ending its production. The alternative was the Continental A40, which produced 37 horsepower. The Taylor E2 was ready for sale, but the company declared bankruptcy and Piper saved the company again by reinvesting. The Cub would be redesigned with changes to the cockpit. The F and G versions would see engine changes. Piper was able to buy out Taylor, and the last of the original Cub creators resigned. Piper would now become president of the company, and under Piper sales were steady and the aircraft was excellent. It was easy to fly and maintain, and it was popular among flying schools. The J2 came out in 1936 and had a number of design changes that led to increases in performance. The company would sell 550 aircraft in 1936. After a fire burned down the factory, they would relocate to Lock Haven in Pennsylvania. Here they would stay until a move to Florida in 1983. This new company was the Piper Aircraft Company. 901 Cubs had been sold by 1937, but it was here that the J3 variant was designed. It came with larger steel tubing in the frame which allowed for a larger engine. With more powerful engines came a need for other modifications. They would add a tail wheel replacing the skid, and the vertical tail needed to be increased. Although it could now come with larger engines, at the start it did not and was still sold with the 40 horsepower Continental. There were three variants available: the Trainer, Seaplane and Sport. The Seaplane was the most expensive, coming in at $1,895. The Cub would receive a 65 horsepower engine, and by the end of 1938 672 would be produced. The J4 Coupe came with a widened fuselage as well as a 50 horsepower Continental A50 engine, and a J4 with a 65 horsepower engine was designed to compete with C.G. Taylor's Taylorcraft B aircraft. The J5 Cruiser was a 3-seat design and came with a more powerful 74 horsepower engine. The Second World War, however, would have Piper having to shift its focus to wartime requirements. The Cub had made headlines in 1938 when it flew from New York to Miami and back, which was a journey of more than 3,800 kilometers and involved refueling in flight. 1938 would also see a J3 Cub fly for 218 hours 23 minutes in California, and in 1939, 185 of them flew around Florida. The Civil Pilot Training Program was a big client, and they would receive close to 2,000 J3 Cubs in 1940. With the war in Europe underway, the training of pilots seemed a prudent thing to be doing. So good was the Cub that orders came in from the Army for an artillery spotter, and the Navy ordered some as trainers. The Cruiser variant was no longer being built, but it served the Navy in a medical role. It came with a unique modification where the rear fuselage could be opened and a stretcher could be lowered within. After the war was a tough time for aviation companies. The expansion that war had brought was no longer needed with peacetime, and although there were more pilots than ever who were looking to keep flying, there were a huge amount of aircraft available. Piper only just managed to stay open. The J3 would become the PA-11 Cub Special and had a redesigned nose. The big difference here was the engine was now fully within the cowling. It now also had wing fuel tanks. The PA-12 and PA-14 family cruiser were larger versions of the Cub. The Super Cub would see a 150 horsepower engine, which was a big upgrade from where the plane began. It would see successes as a crop duster and had 2 variants associated with this role. The Cub would continue in its military service after the war with a number of nations. It is estimated that more than 34,000 Cubs have been produced since 1938, an incredible number of this incredible plane.